Number 3. It all started in the second semester of my sophomore year. College had been routine until then. Classes, parties, occasional hookups, and late-night study sessions. But things changed when I first started noticing the notes. The first one was stuck to the back of my dorm room door. It wasn't anything creepy at first, just a single word written in neat, small letters. Hi. I figured it was one of my roommates playing a prank, or maybe a friend messing with me. I didn't think much of it, crumpled it up, and threw it away. But then, they kept coming. I'd find them everywhere, under my laptop, inside my textbooks, even in my coat pocket. Sometimes they'd say things like, "You're not alone," or "I see you." At first, I tried to laugh it off. College pranks weren't new, and this one seemed pretty harmless. But after the third week, I started to feel uneasy. Whoever it was, they knew my schedule. They knew where I'd be, when I'd be there, and what I was doing, and it was only escalating. I tried asking my roommates if they were behind it, but they all denied it convincingly. They even seemed a little freaked out when I showed them the notes, so I started being more careful, keeping an eye out for anyone acting suspicious. I asked around, but no one had seen anyone going near my stuff. Then came the day when I found the note inside my locked dorm room. That was when things shifted from a weird prank to something more sinister. I'd been at the library, studying for a midterm, until late. When I got back to my room, exhausted and ready to crash, I found a folded piece of paper lying on my pillow. My heart raced as I unfolded it. This one wasn't like the others. It read, "I was here while you were gone. I'll be back." The room felt colder suddenly, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones. How did they get in? My roommates hadn't been home. My door had been locked. And what scared me the most, how close they'd been to my bed, to my stuff. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every shuffle in the hallway outside my dorm made me sit up and listen, heart pounding. I started double-checking my locks, keeping the blinds closed and making sure I wasn't alone on campus. I even reported it to campus security, but without any solid evidence, there wasn't much they could do. They just told me to be more careful, to stay alert. The notes stopped for a while after that. Things felt normal again, until I started seeing him. It was small things at first. A tall figure standing in the distance as I walked to class or lingering in the library, always at the edge of my vision. He'd be there one moment and gone the next. I tried telling myself it was just paranoia, that I was imagining things. But one evening, as I left the gym, I felt something watching me. I turned around and there he was, standing under the streetlight, his face obscured by the hood of his jacket. I froze. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring. My skin crawled, the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I bolted for my dorm, my breath ragged as I sprinted up the stairs and locked the door behind me. I couldn't shake the feeling that he had followed me, that he was just outside. That night, I found another note on my desk, even though I had locked the door as soon as I got inside. "You can't hide from me." I was officially terrified. I started avoiding my usual routes, going to class at different times, studying in different buildings, taking long, winding routes back to my dorm. But no matter how much I tried to shake it, I always had the same feeling of being watched. The figure appeared more frequently, always just far enough away that I couldn't see his face, but close enough to make my heart race. Things came to a head one night in early spring. I was walking back from a late study session with my friend Emma. We parted ways outside her dorm, and I hurried toward mine. The campus was empty, eerily quiet, and the air had that cool, damp scent of impending rain. I kept my head down, but I couldn't shake the sensation that someone was following me. As I reached my dorm building, I glanced back, and there he was, closer than he'd ever been, standing just a few feet behind me. His hood was up, his face hidden, but I knew it was him. I panicked. I ran inside, slamming the door shut and bolting it behind me. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, about to call campus security, when I heard a knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. My heart stopped. I backed away from the door, barely able to breathe. Whoever it was, they knew I was inside. Then I heard a voice, familiar, calm, but with a dark edge I hadn't noticed before. "It's me, Alex. Open up." I blinked. It was Eric, my roommate. Relief flooded through me as I unlocked the door, but something felt off. Why had Eric been out so late? And how did he know I was just getting home? I opened the door slightly, and there he stood, smiling like nothing was wrong. "I've been waiting for you," he said, stepping inside before I could react. And then it hit me. The hoodie, the notes, the feeling of being watched. Eric had been there all along. He was my stalker, my own roommate. I tried to play it cool, acting like nothing was wrong, but my mind was racing. The guy I'd shared a dorm with, trusted, had been tormenting me for weeks. I felt sick, my hands cold and clammy as I backed away. "You all right, man?" he asked, his smile fading as he studied me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He turned and headed to his room, but not before giving me one last look, a knowing, twisted grin spreading across his face. I knew then that this wasn't over. He had been toying with me, and now he knew that I knew. As I lay in bed that night, I realized something even more horrifying. All this time, I thought I was being stalked by someone outside. But it wasn't just Eric watching me. It was me. I had let it happen. I had ignored the red flags, the strange behaviors. I had been living with my stalker for months, brushing off the signs because I didn't want to believe it. And now, I was trapped in the same room, with no one left to trust. Because the scariest part of it all, he's still here, right now, and I have no idea what he'll do next. Number 2. It began with the feeling of being watched. I'm sure every woman's felt it at some point. That nagging awareness that someone's eyes are on you. You tell yourself it's just paranoia and your mind playing tricks, but what happens when it's not? My name is Sarah, and until a few months ago, I had a pretty normal life. College, work, friends. It all felt safe. Until the night I first saw him. I was walking home from a late shift at the cafe, earbuds in, music on low. It was around 11 p.m., the streets mostly deserted, just the hum of city lights and the occasional car driving by. My apartment was only a few blocks away, so I wasn't worried. Not at first. But then, I noticed him. At first, it was just a figure at the edge of my vision, standing under a street lamp on the opposite side of the road. I couldn't make out his face, just his dark silhouette. His posture was casual, like he was waiting for someone. But something about the way he stood there, still as a statue, made the hair on my arm stand up. I kept walking, quickening my pace. The closer I got to my apartment, the more I felt the weight of his eyes on me. I glanced back and he hadn't moved, still standing there, watching. My heart pounded as I fumbled with my keys and rushed inside, locking the door behind me. For the next few days, I convinced myself it was nothing, just a stranger minding his own business. Then I saw him again. This time, it was broad daylight. I was sitting in the campus library, cramming for an exam, when I caught a glimpse of him through the window. Same dark silhouette, same stillness. He wasn't looking at me directly, but I knew he was there for me. That's when the note started. They were simple at first, tucked under my apartment door or left on my car windshield. Each note was the same. I'm watching you. I tried to ignore them, but the frequency grew. Every day, a new note, always the same message. It didn't matter where I went or what time of day it was. He knew where I was, and he was always watching. I stopped going out alone. I changed my routes, started taking Ubers everywhere. I even told a few friends, but they thought I was overreacting. It's probably just some creep, they said. Ignore him, he'll get bored. But he didn't get bored. He got bolder. One night, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. A text message from an unknown number. I can see you. My blood ran cold. I glanced around my dark room, every shadow suddenly feeling sinister. How could he see me? I was in my apartment, my blinds closed, my door locked. There was no way. I responded, "Who are you?" No answer, just silence. I lay awake for hours, every creak of the floorboards making my heart race, until I finally fell into a restless sleep. Things got worse after that. He started leaving things for me, personal things. An old photo of me and my mom at my high school graduation, a scarf I had lost weeks earlier. Once, I even found my favorite book, which had gone missing from my apartment, sitting on my front doorstep. I went to the police. I reported the stalking, showed them the notes, the text, but without any concrete proof of who was behind it, there wasn't much they could do. "Be careful," the officer said. "Keep your doors locked. Call us if you see anything suspicious." Suspicious? My entire life had become suspicious. The worst part was, I never saw his face. He was always there, just out of reach, just beyond where I could confront him. I was trapped in a constant state of dread, waiting for the next note, the next sighting, the next inevitable escalation. Then, one night, it happened. I was in bed, scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from the anxiety gnawing at my mind. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that makes you feel like something's about to happen. That's when I heard it. A soft tapping sound. I froze, straining to hear. It was faint, but unmistakable. Someone was tapping on my bedroom window. I lived on the second floor. My heart leaped into my throat. Slowly, I turned to face the window. The blinds were closed, but I could still see the silhouette of a figure standing outside. His outline was illuminated by the glow of the street lamp below, and he was just standing there, tapping on the glass with his fingers. I couldn't breathe. How the hell did he get up there? Was he using a ladder? My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, ready to call the police, but before I could dial, I heard a voice, soft, familiar, coming from the other side of the glass. "Sarah, open the window." I gasped. The voice, it wasn't a stranger's. It was mine. I dropped the phone, my mind racing. How was this possible? Was I losing it? My reflection in the window. My own voice outside. It was all wrong. I didn't move. The tapping stopped. You can't hide from yourself. And then it hit me, like a wave crashing over my body. It had never been about someone else stalking me. It was me. The notes, the gifts, the sightings, it all made sense now. I had created the stalker, piece by piece. A part of my mind, buried deep, had splintered, and I'd been tormenting myself all along. The things that went missing, the texts, the tapping at the window, every fear, every moment of paranoia, I had made real. I was the one leaving the notes. I was the one following myself, watching, waiting. I didn't just feel like I was being watched. I was the watcher. Number 1. It started small, almost unnoticeable, like a drop of water hitting your face in the rain. You feel it, but you wipe it away and keep going, never really thinking about it. That's how it felt at first. I'm James, just your average guy, mid-30s, freelance designer, living alone in a one-bedroom apartment in the city. Most of my work happens from home, and when I'm not on my laptop, I'm either grabbing coffee at the cafe down the street or hitting the gym. My life was pretty predictable, quiet and peaceful, until it wasn't. The first time I noticed something was off was about 6 months ago. I was at the gym, doing my usual late-night workout. It's less crowded after 9 p.m., which is why I go then. On this particular night, I was midway through my bench press set when I caught a glimpse of someone staring at me in the mirror. It was just a glance, enough to make me pause, but when I turned around, the guy was gone. I didn't think much of it at the time, figured it was nothing. Maybe he was waiting for the bench or just zoning out. But over the next few weeks, I started seeing him more often. He'd show up at the gym, always at odd hours, always keeping his distance. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But he never used the machines, never worked out. He'd just sit in the corner, scrolling on his phone, occasionally glancing my way. One night, I saw him in the grocery store. I was picking up a few things for dinner when I spotted him down the aisle, pretending to look at cereal but clearly watching me. My stomach twisted, but I tried to stay calm. He wasn't doing anything illegal, just being a little creepy, right? But it was the consistency that unnerved me. It felt like every time I turned around, he was there, just on the edge of my life, watching. I brushed it off for weeks, convincing myself it was a weird coincidence, but the anxiety built. I started changing my routine, going to the gym earlier, taking different routes when walking home, anything to shake the sense of being followed. And then I saw him again. It was late, around midnight. I was coming back from a client meeting and walking down the quiet streets toward my apartment. As I reached the corner, I noticed a shadow in the distance, just far enough away that I couldn't make out his face, but close enough for me to know it was him. My heart pounded as I sped up. I didn't want to seem paranoid, but something in me screamed that I needed to get inside. I reached my building and fumbled with my keys, feeling his eyes boring into the back of my head. Finally, I got inside, slammed the door, and stood there, listening for any footsteps behind me. Silence. I stood by the door for a few minutes, trying to catch my breath, wondering what the hell was going on. Why was this guy always around me? What did he want? That night, I barely slept. I kept checking the windows, peeking out, convinced he'd be standing outside, waiting for me. But every time I looked, the streets was empty. The next morning, I called the police, explaining the situation, gave them his description, told them about the gym, the grocery store, the late-night stalking. They took my report, but you could tell they weren't convinced. Have you spoken to him? Maybe he's just a guy from the neighborhood. No, I hadn't spoken to him. I didn't want to, and why should I have to? But they shrugged it off, told me to keep an eye out, and said they'd patrol the area more frequently. The next week passed without incident. No strange sightings, no shadowy figures lingering on my walks. I thought maybe he had moved on or that the police presence had scared him off. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Then, one evening, while I was working on my laptop, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You're safe for now, but I'm closer than you think." My blood ran cold. I stared at the message, trying to make sense of it. Closer than I think? What did that mean? How did he get my number? I wanted to respond, demand answers, but something stopped me. A sickening dread spread through my stomach. I looked around my apartment, half expecting him to burst through the door. But nothing happened. Just the quiet hum of my laptop and the faint sound of traffic outside. I called the police again, showed them the message. They told me to block the number and report any further contact. I did as they said, but the anxiety gnawed at me. That night, I locked every door, checked every window, and even put a chair against the front door. I wasn't taking any chances. A few days later, I was sitting at my desk, working, when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the thought of him showing up in my apartment made my skin crawl. I peeked through the peephole. It wasn't him. It was my downstairs neighbor, Tom, an older guy in his 50s. We had exchanged pleasantries in the hallway before, but never really talked much. I opened the door cautiously. "Hey, James, right?" he said, offering a friendly smile. "I just wanted to check on you. You've been acting a little off lately. Everything okay?" I nodded, not wanting to get into it with him. "Yeah, just busy with work. Why?" He hesitated for a moment, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "I've noticed someone hanging around outside your place the past few nights. Same guy, standing by the building, looking up at your window." My stomach dropped. "You've seen him too?" Tom nodded grimly. "Yeah, he's been out here every night. I thought you should know." I thanked him, my mind racing. If Tom had seen him, then it wasn't just in my head. This guy was real, and he was getting bolder. That night, I barely slept, waiting for the inevitable knock on the door or the sound of footsteps outside my window. But the hours passed in agonizing silence. And then it happened. Around 3 a.m., I heard it. A soft tapping on the glass. My heart froze. I slowly got out of bed and crept toward the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to see outside. He was there, standing directly below my window, looking up at me. That same dark figure that had been haunting me for months. But now I could see his face, and it was twisted in a knowing smile. I backed away, shaking, when I heard something that made my blood turn into ice. "James, what are you doing?" The voice wasn't coming from outside. It was behind me. I spun around, my heart in my throat, and there, standing in the corner of my room, was Tom. "I told you," he said, stepping closer, his smile widening. "I've been watching you all along." In that moment, it all clicked. The texts, the sightings, the concern for my safety. It was never the stranger outside. It had been Tom the entire time.